Why does the darkness remind me of the time I took a 3-hour tour of that monumental architectural oddity made of debris? Let's just call it Rubble Castle, lest I incur some sort of family curse from the builder's connections. The place probably comes to mind because it was frankly the most disconcerting 3 hours in all my travels. It's tangibly haunted by the ghost of derangement. That phrase, the ghost of derangement, yields 0 Gogol results, which just goes to show how evasive and unpredictable that spirit is. As with the gaudy folk art madness of Salvation Mountain near the Salton Sea, Rubble Castle is like stepping inside a mental disorder involving a breakdown between thought and behavior, leading to faulty perception, inappropriate actions, withdrawal from reality, and fragmented delusional fantasies. Yes, Rubble Castle is a malignant folly fashioned out of garbage, both in the sense of litter and of balderdash. But when we compare it to the Integratron time machine 2 hours away in the desert, even though George Van Tassel's plans for construction were dictated by extraterrestrials from Venus, the Integratron doesn't feel crazy when you sit within its dome. Rubble Castle and Salvation Mountain do feel crazy, to the point that lingering in those spaces becomes extraordinarily uncomfortable. There's a line between quaint idiosyncrasy and chronic madness. The spaces themselves were disconcerting enough, but the history I heard about Rubble Castle was even more disconcerting. Not only highly improbable information at every turn, but so questionable as to beggar belief. I lost count after 50 statements were made that I simply couldn't accept as conceivable in any known universe, and I'm on the permanent record as being unsuspicious to a fault. There was actually only a single statement on the Rubble Castle tour that I could get to the bottom of. Rubble once worked on a ship as captain's purser and ate and slept in the captain's quarters. And when he accidentally bought a Mercedes at an auction with money he didn't have while the ship was docked in Germany, the captain hoisted the car onto the ship with a crane and it sailed back to the US on the ship's prow. When the captain died, he left Rubble a substantial inheritance in honor of the great conversations they had. Okay, so the way I heard that story, some amazing diction took place in the captain's quarters. That's totally cool, and no doubt Rubble earned his car and his inheritance, and I can understand why the story isn't more explicit in the tour. But there were so many other instances of Rubble receiving astonishingly grand gifts and favors from dozens of people. The way he finally got hold of his acreage is practically a book's worth in itself. It was initially given to him by the original orchard owner when Rubble was still a teenager. If only I ever had such friendly neighbors. Then it got donated out from under him to the Episcopal Church, and he had to find another wealthy benefactor to buy the property back from the church. Then there's the fact that the castle he built violates city codes and is entirely illegal, yet somehow permitted just the same with nobody getting arrested and no bulldozers being summoned. And the fact that he has objects in there that seemingly couldn't have been installed. A wildly heavy locomotive caboose, for example. The story being that he couldn't get permits for its delivery and so somehow compelled a freight hauler and a crane operator at midnight to illegally install it. And even if we believe all that happened, how he got the crane up the steep driveway is a whole other story. Seriously, there are enough enormous, incredibly heavy objects in the place that the easiest explanation is that Rubble knew the magic of weightlessness. And get this, he summoned hundreds of volunteers over 2 decades to build the castle for him, their only payment being pizza? That's another place the story loses me. Who on earth knows hundreds of people who will do very difficult manual labor for free over decades? The tour guide didn't offer any explanations, and I didn't ask any follow-up questions because I knew I wouldn't believe whatever he answered. There was a story about the time Rubble worked as a school bus driver and used the bus to cart back an entire busload of free wine that was being given away by a winery. That's merely a single example of implausible anecdotes. If wineries give away busloads of wine and everybody else on earth already knows that, I stand corrected. Oh yeah, that time Rubble wanted to go to England and needed a bank loan to finance it. When he filled out the paperwork, writing none for his checking account number, none for his savings account number, none for his employer, and want to leave the country for the purpose of the loan, the bank decided to give him a loan anyway. Gee, I need to visit Rubble's bank. I won't even need an account there. How stupid do they think tourists are? The luck and generosity and humanitarianism that this guy received through his life simply beggars belief. And yet they don't say who he was really. How royal could he have been? How well connected? His father was a gag writer for radio, so perhaps some New York and Hollywood connections, but unless the family line was old money all the way back to ancient Phoenicia, where was the power? Why did President Eisenhower visit there with a contingent of Secret Service? Why did the Archbishop of Canterbury? Or Prince Philip? Or Henry Kissinger? I can almost accept the fact that Bob Hope went and Jack Benny, comedic connections through Rubble's humorist father. Alfred Hitchcock leaves me more puzzled. And if Rubble were indeed a trillionaire, why did he use garbage to construct a castle before recycling was even cool? That gets us back to the blatant evidence that some mental illness was at play here, the sort Philip K. Dick writes about more than the others, hebephrenia. And the castle grounds aren't quaint. They're an utter mess, like a city dump with a clock tower. Great clock tower. The clock is an antique, one of only 6 ever made, that the Smithsonian was desperate to acquire. Don't ask how Rubble got some rich guy to buy it for him at a price that Rubble had to vow never to disclose. No, I couldn't fathom anything I heard, and 3 hours of immersion in 3-dimensional hebephrenia was simply overwhelming. But don't get me wrong, I adore homemade castles. Come to think of it, factoring in the other fortresses I visited and studied over the years, aren't they all glorified Rubble castles? Well-to-do fruitcakes with varying nuttiness, getting idiosyncratic, monstrositological shrines to themselves built with free labor? The history of the world flashes before my lashes. Who was it who said that the past seldom recurs, but frequently rhymes?